Let's get into some NBA news and notes, starting off with Kawhi Leonard. There's no news from Pablo Torre right now. There's just a lot of people talking behind the scenes about, well, what's going to happen next? What is the NBA going to look at here that we don't know about publicly? And one of the things that keeps coming up is what the CBA says about cap circumvention. Because if you look at Article 13, circumvention, which is Section 4, page 344 of the NBA CBA, it says this, and this is interesting here. It says, the system arbitrator shall have the authority upon good cause shown to direct any team affiliate, or player to produce any tax returns or other relevant tax materials disclosing income figures for the player. Now that stands out for this reason, because we know about KL2 Aspire. That's the LLC that was created November 22nd, 2021. That's what really started this whole investigation that Pablo Torre has really dug incredibly deep into on his podcast that Mark Cuban is still tweeting about every minute, it seems like. But what about the other LLCs? Because if you look at the California database or in Florida as well, there are a lot of LLCs that have been created with KL2 ever since Kawhi Leonard signed with the Clippers. This is publicly known information. This is not anything that you can have to dig deep for. But in California, for example, there was 16 KL2 LLCs that were registered. That's not abnormal for the super wealthy to have a bunch of LLCs like Kawhi Leonard is. But for the NBA, in theory, they could ask for the tax returns for all of these LLCs. And that's what's interesting here, because if you look at the timing of when these LLCs were created, 3 of them are all made very close together. There's this one called KL2 Content that was made December 28th, 23. There was one called KL2 RIFC Real Estate made January 2nd, and then another one made on January 2nd as well. So there was 3 made within 10 days before Kawhi Leonard signed a contract extension with the Los Angeles Clippers worth 3 years and $153 million. That deal was signed or reported on January 10th of 2024. So this is just circumstantial observation here. This is all this is. But if the NBA is diving deep into this, they could ask for tax returns for all of these LLCs if they desired to. And that's what NBA executives are talking about right now in the conversations I've had. They're wondering, how deep in is the NBA really going to dive here? Are they going to go through all of these? Or are they just going to look at the Aspire stuff and kind of not worry about everything else that's out there? But the fact is that because of what we know about Aspire, because that's public information that Pablo Torre dug up because of what had happened with Aspiration. But the NBA says the NBA can compel Kawhi Leonard to have talks documents produced as part of this investigation. And so it's very possible me and you and the public aren't going to find anything else about this until, the NBA does their investigation here. But the NBA can look into these LLCs, and they have the ability to do that. And I think that could help dictate their decision whether it's to punish the Clippers or not, and how harshly they actually end up doing it. So just keep some of that stuff in mind, because the CBA does have that ability in there. Now, let's move on from Kawhi Leonard and talk about the real big news from this week in the NBA, and that is the injury of Fred VanVleet. And to do that, my new coworker, Kelly Iko, was hired by Yahoo Sports after 7 years with The Athletic. I'm very, very excited to have Kelly on the team, and here he is to talk about Fred VanVleet and what it means for the Houston Rockets. All right, Kelly, welcome to Yahoo. How you doing, man?
Hey, thanks for having me, KLC. This is a dream. This is a real dream come true. So thank you.
I'm excited to talk to you. Unfortunately, under these circumstances, Fred VanVleet, torn ACL news came out on Monday. You had reported that it happened during a team minicamp in the Bahamas. Tore his right ACL. What was your initial reaction to this news, Fred VanVleet tearing his ACL, and how do you think it impacts the Rockets this year?
I mean, right off the bat, it's a bummer. The Rockets, the whole point of this offseason that they've been trying to build was to plan for a legitimate title run. And at the center of that was Fred VanVleet the emotional leader on and off the floor. He's the extension of Ime Udoka on the court. He's the team's table setter, the organizer, the constructor, defensive playmaker, floor spacer, and just the consummate professional. So all their plans for this season, how to pair with Kevin Durant. I talked to Fred a lot during the summer, and everything that he was talking about was how efficient that two-man game will be, how it's going to open up things for Alperen Şengün, how it's going to allow guys like Amen Thompson and Reece Shepard to grow and develop quickly, and ultimately how it makes them a dangerous threat, to the Thunder and the Western Conference. So now, all of a sudden, a week before camp, he's down for the season. So now you have to pivot pretty quickly. If you're Ime Udoka, how do you plan? How do you change the lineup? How do you get the best five-man pairing on the floor at all times? This is a large team, a defensively stout team, but offensively, can you be efficient enough in the half court? The Rockets struggled a lot in the half court last season. They couldn't space the floor well. They couldn't hit threes at a consistent rate. How do you hang in the Western Conference when you have the likes of the Denver Nuggets, Oklahoma City Thunder, the Clippers maybe, and just seeing what this looks like moving forward is going to be a big question.
I want you to hear me out with my process here. I think losing Fred VanVleet both lowers their floor and raises their ceiling. And what I mean by that is it lowers their floor because he's steady. Fred VanVleet is a good player. He's a veteran. He's important to that team with their mentality as a veteran, as a locker room guy. He's important. That's undeniable. But it also raises their ceiling in the sense that VanVleet has his limitations. He just does. He doesn't get to the basket. He's a small guard. He is, statistically one of the least efficient clutch scorers in the NBA the last 4 or 5 years. He shoots near the bottom of the NBA at clutch moments, in part because he doesn't get to the basket, doesn't create easy shots, takes a lot of tough shots, contested three-pointers off the dribble, contested deep twos. So with him, it raises their ceiling in the sense that they're ripping the Band-Aid off now. More Amen Thompson. You get to see what you're going to get out of him. More Reece Shepard. Is he going to be able to have more big games like he did down the stretch of last season with the limited opportunities he received?
Right.
He's an elite shooter. He's a really good playmaker. He's a playmaker on defense as well. So you get to see these young guys. You get to see more Şengün playmaking, a little bit of point KD as well. And I think with the Rockets, that's where I keep coming back to. The floor is lower, but the ceiling is higher because now the Band-Aid has just been ripped right off. And these young guys are going to get thrown in the fire, particularly Amen Thompson and Reece Shepard. And you get to see what you have long wondered about those guys. That's why you took them in the top 5. And now we're about to find out. They have no choice but to find out, and they need it from those guys. And they could be better than VanVleet when it comes to opening a championship window. But of course, there's no guarantees there. And that's the fear. And that's why there's so much sadness among Rockets fans now.
Yeah, so I kind of equate point guards to running backs in the sense of mileage. And you look at Fred at age 31, a lot of miles on his tank. And he talked about extensively over the summer, hey, if Amen and Reed step up and elevate their roles, I can take a step back. And going back to what you said about, the Band-Aid coming off and allowing guys like Alp, who's had a great Eurobasket to really step into his own more of as a half-court offensive focal point, kind of running actions through him. You bring in Durant, who's been a proficient playmaker as well. Allowing guys like Amen Thompson and Reece Shepard to play freely and fast, I think can do them a lot of good. And it really forces the Rockets to have some really tough conversations during camp because, face it, this is a team that they're going to be a lot of eyes on, once camp opens up and preseason comes, because they're expected to compete with the likes of Denver, Oklahoma City in the Western Conference pretty quickly. And having KD in that locker room, you almost are demanded to be a championship level team, regardless of if you think you're ready or not. So, Reece Shepard is a guy who the Rockets have talked about extensively internally as this is a guy that we believe super high on. The whole thing coming into the summer was if he takes that next step, we're going to give him more minutes, more touches, more usage, and that should translate because going back to what you said, you've been very high on Reed coming out of college in terms of the defensive playmaking, the floor spacing, just the way he can handle the ball. And if they're able to do more with him, I think it does raise their ceiling in terms of they might win fewer games in the regular season because Fred is, he's a heavy guy that you can depend on. But in the playoffs, it might be if a man takes that second step, if Reed takes that second step, you compare that with the likes of Kevin Durant, Şengün, and Dorian Finney-Smith and see what you have.
One of the questions I've had on my mind with this Rockets team, when we did our, we're doing our division preview on my pod, and when we did the Rockets, my question was, do they have enough shooting still? Like after adding Kevin Durant and after adding Dorian Finney-Smith, with this roster, you're shaking your head. You still don't think they have enough shooting, Kelly?
Yes and no. I mean, if you go back to last season, this was a pretty bad shooting team, but the bulk of their decent shooting, is gone now. Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks. Now you've brought in Dorian Finney-Smith, who is a good shooter. You can hit from the corners. He's excellent from the corners, actually. You bring in Kevin Durant, who's excellent everywhere from the perimeter. The question now becomes, does Alperen Şengün take that next leap in terms of becoming comfortable with taking threes and hitting them at a decent clip, maybe even low 30s? Amen Thompson, because, if the ball in his hands, teams are going to go under screens a lot. Obviously he can get to the rim at will, but what does his next stage of development look like? And the biggest thing for the Rockets that's kept them from advancing in the playoffs last season was that half-court lack of execution. The Warriors just went zone the whole series and said, we dare you to shoot 25, 33s to beat us, and they couldn't do it. So I'm not sure if I know adding Kevin Durant gives them much more proficiency in that department, but losing Fred at the same time, as well as Dillon and Jalen, it kind of puts them in a precarious spot.
Do you think they're true championship contenders without Fred VanVleet, or do they fall into a lower category in your eyes at this point?
I think before the season started, with Fred healthy, I had them kind of below Denver in terms of if you were to rank Oklahoma City 1, Denver 2, Houston probably 2.5. I still think that they can win a series because the playoffs ain't think it happen. And if you have Kevin Durant on your team in the playoffs, you should have, a pretty good chance of advancing. But it's going to come down to the little things. Like, what do those young guys who have now had a year of experience in the playoffs look with going forward, and how do they react to adverse situations? Can they adapt on the fly pretty quickly? And that's going to tell me if this team is a true contender or not. I'll know by December.
I mean, one of the tough things for Houston right now is that they cannot sign anybody because they're against the cap right now. So they can't. And people are like, well, should they go get Russell Westbrook? Well, they can't do that. They can't. They're not allowed to. And when it comes to trades, they have a bunch of guys that aren't trade eligible at this point. And the guys that are trade eligible, you wouldn't move, as Yossi said in his post on screen here. Kevin Durant, Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd, Tyrese, and you're not trading any of those guys who are trade eligible. So like Houston is in a position right now where I talked to like a bunch of executives over the last 24 hours since this injury happened. What do you think Houston's going to do? All of them say they're likely going to go into the year with the team that they have, play those young guys, then come December, January, that's where you think about what they're going to make for moves, make for trades. But Fred VanVleet still has a no trade clause because of the 2-year deal he signed, Kelly. So my question for you is, do you think with Fred VanVleet, he has a $25 million deal? That's a very, very, very tradable number, but he has the no trade clause. Do you have any indication or any insight into whether he'd be willing to waive that no trade clause? Because that would be the piece. That would be the piece you would want to move with the Rockets, right?
Yeah. Not at this time. I don't. I think it's still pretty raw in their existence. I talked to them the other day and they said, look, this is the bed that we made. If we're going to go into the season, these are the guys that we're going to go to battle with. So, come December, you might have different conversations. Clint Capella is making a team-friendly salary. You could see something with that. But outside of that, these are the guys that they want in their rotation. Ime specifically handcrafted this roster, right? And his identity is length, versatility, and size on the perimeter. Tyrese and Jabari Smith Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, adding Josh Okogie, guys like Jayshawn Tate. You want to have as many guys as possible. Now, yes, some of this comes down to whether or not Amen Thompson can take the reins and, make that position his own. If you talk to people that are close to him, they've always said that he's a guard playing power forward for the Rockets last season. Now he goes back to his natural position. What can that look like if you give him the keys and you flank him with Durant, Şengün, and Jabari Smith? It might look fantastic. Now, if Reed Shepard comes along and can give you legitimate production off the bench, if he actually can up his, I think he shot 32% from three last season, about subpar PER, look like 9.5. If he can come in and now he's shooting 38% from three and he's giving you 10, 11 points a game, 3 or 4 assists a game, suddenly the loss of Fred isn't as bad as you thought it could be potentially if those guys can fill that gap. So I think they have enough pieces right now to where they can stay afloat. Going back to what you said about lowering the floor, the real question will come, mid-December if they're fifth in the Western Conference and they have these guys that are available to be traded. What does the front office get aggressive and creative, or do they just carry on and push on to the playoffs?
And I think that's going to be the big question there is like, it's going to be a stage of evaluation for the youth. Like, does Amen Thompson take a leap? Does Jabari Smith, does Alperen Şengün start shooting, mid-high 30s from three? Like, do some of these younger guys raise the ceiling of this Rockets team? And then you're in a position where it's like, well, we should make an all-in move here. Fred, please waive the no-trade clause. Please. Or is it a position where it's like, let's just stick with what we have and let's roll it out with this team. And Fred's part of the locker room. He's like an extended coach, and he's part of the reason of our early season success. And then he comes back next year and he's a six man for us. Maybe that's what it turns into. It's very, very, very hard to predict at this point. But the Rockets were already one of the most interesting teams in the NBA. I think they become more interesting to watch this year because we're moving the VanVleet variable and now the increased opportunity for those other young guys. So I'm stoked. Like opening night, man, like against Oklahoma City in OKC.
My God. This is going to be crazy.
Said, woo, I cannot wait. And so, Kelly, you get hired by Yahoo Sports from The Athletic after, I think, 7 years there covering the Rockets. You're still going to be based in Houston, you said. And now you're hired as a national NBA reporter here with us at Yahoo. What are you most excited about for this season? For your, whether it's personal with your job and traveling or something league-wide with the NBA, whatever it is.
I think what I'm most excited for is the ability to tell stories on a bigger stage and collaborate with people like you, Divine, Morton, just guys that know the game and want to tell good stories. I think the NBA content space, there's so much more to be delivered on. And I think coming here and allowing myself to spread and just work with talented professionals like yourself and just see what's out there, I think that's the dream come true. And we all love the game. We all love the sport, and being able to identify with the readers and the audience on a deeper, more intimate stage is going to be a dream come true for me. So looking forward to it.
I'm fired up to work with you, Kelly. I've loved your work for a long time, and it's cool to
be
teammates with you. Appreciate you joining me today, man. We'll do that, definitely pod again very soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, so media days have gotten started this week already. Let's go through a few of the things that I've observed from our first couple of days of media day. With the New York Knicks, Mike Brown, I am loving everything he's talking about with this system, the way he imagines things for the Knicks. He wants more pace. He wants more drive and kick. He wants more movement. He wants to alleviate the pressure off of Jalen Brunson. I mean, look, Brunson, as amazing as he is, dude's been pounding the ball into the floor possession after possession after possession. Not a lot of diversity in that half-court offense, despite having Karl Anthony Towns, who can handle and run dribble handoffs, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, among others on this team that can do stuff with the ball in their hands. It seems like that's the vision Mike Brown has for this Knicks offense. And to me, I think that's really exciting. And I hope the players embrace that, because that's what could make them serious championship contenders, rather than doing a lot of the stuff that was very frustrating under Thibodeau over the last handful of years. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo in a translated interview. He had some interesting comments talking about his future, his place in Milwaukee. He did say like he's fully invested, it seems, in the Bucks this year. He's thinking about leading that team in the Eastern Conference. But he made a very interesting comment. He said, look, I hope it never happens, but I'm expecting it too. Just because you've given a lot to a team doesn't mean the team doesn't do what's best for itself. And that was in regards to possibly being traded someday. And with the Bucks, we so often talk about, well, Giannis, what does he want for his future? Does he want to be part of the Milwaukee Bucks moving forward? We almost never talk about, well, what do the Milwaukee Bucks want for their future? And I think with Milwaukee, everything that they've done, all of their actions indicate a team that is desperate to keep Giannis happy. I mean, if you waive Damian Lillard and absorb that money over the next 5 years to sign Miles Turner, that is a risk. And also, like, it is, you're stomaching a lot of money on your cap moving forward when there's no guarantees of Giannis wanting to stay. But all of this is being done to appease him and optimize his chances of leading this team to another championship while he's still in a Milwaukee Bucks uniform. But things can change. Like if the Bucks are a 500 team in this very weak, sad Eastern Conference, like there's going to be teams calling up that are like, hey, we'll give you everything we have to go get Giannis. We'll give you 7 first-round picks. We'll give you all the swaps we have. We'll give you everything. And if you're the Bucks at that point, you might take a meeting. And I think that's why Giannis's comments were very honest and forward, because it seems he's committed to the Bucks. But in the back of his mind, he knows there's a possibility that it's the Bucks who end up saying, hey, we need to move on here. There's no path for us to create a championship contender. This is what was best for us, and hopefully it's best for you as well. So very interesting Giannis would come out and say that this week. We got some news from Jason Tatum as well. He did a bit of a media tour, kind of random. I think he did Good Morning America or one of those national morning shows. He did First Take, and that's where the big quote Tatum had came from. He said to Stephen A. Smith, I haven't said I'm not playing this season. The most important thing is a full recovery, being 100%, not rushing it at all. But also, I don't go to rehab 6 days a week for nothing. That's what Tatum said. And on this podcast, every Boston media appearance I've done this year, ever since the injury, I've pretty much said pretty consistently, I'm not ruling Tatum out from coming back. This is the dude who idolizes Kobe Bryant, who looks to be in great condition, got the surgery immediately from the best Achilles doctor in the world, Martin O'Malley, who, by the way, O'Malley had an interesting quote today as well in People magazine. He said, I don't think I've seen a person's calf look as strong as his. At 6 or 8 weeks, he was doing double heel rises. He worked his calf so hard that the side effect of loss of strength, I don't think he's going to have any. And that's Tatum's doctor himself who said that. And so, I think that all of this media tour stuff from Tatum getting out there doesn't necessarily mean he's going to come back. But I do think it's further evidence of a guy who is far in his recovery and who does have the intentions to return. And so for the Celtics, depending on the sports book you look at, they're plus 5,000 on, I think, BetMGM and FanDuel. They're plus 8,000 on DraftKings to win the 2026 NBA Finals. The East is so bad. Like Cleveland's dealing with the Darius Garland injury. They just signed Killian Hayes today, by the way. Good for them to give Killian a chance. I'm still rooting for Killian. And then the Knicks, of course, new coach, new system, no guarantee to work. The Magic, did they add enough shooting? And other than that, I don't really think you can make an argument for any of these teams as like they're a championship contender. But if Boston is on a 46 win pace, with Peyton Pritchard having a good year and so Jaylen Brown even better next season and some of these younger guys off their bench having good years, maybe Tatum comes back in March and suddenly Boston reinserts itself back into the championship conversation. And we'll see. Health is going to be number one. He very well might miss the entire season, and maybe that'll be for his best, but I'm not ruling it out unless he rules it out. And so far, that has not yet happened. We did get another piece of news. The Warriors, according to Mark Stein over on his Substack, said regardless of what happens with the Kuminga situation, once that ends, the Warriors will be signing Al Horford, Seth Curry, Gary Payton II, and DeAnthony Melton. This Warriors roster, with all those veterans, it makes more sense. It works, a bit better with some of those guys. I like them signing some energy off the bench with Seth Curry. But to me, I look at this team and I'm just like, Kuminga doesn't want to be there. He's holding all of this up. He's not a great fit. And we'll see if he signs a qualifying offer, which I doubt. I would expect he takes that 2+1 deal, whether it's the team or player option. Of course, he wants the player option. I just think it would be short-sighted of him not to take that life-changing wealth that he would be able to receive by taking that deal. It's $50 million. Like, let's be real. We a lot of us would do crazy things for $50 million. So signing $8 million 1-year deal, that's not going to last you forever if you're coming in. He should take the 2+1, in my opinion. And then if you get traded, it's going to be to a team that wants you. And for the Warriors, that's why they want that deal. But regardless of the Kuminga situation, I like the Horford acquisition. If that actually happens, Curry, Peyton, and Melton coming back as well, it all makes sense for the Warriors. We'll talk about that more once there's more clarity, but wanted to highlight that because it was reported by Mark Stein, and he is as solid as it possibly gets.